Hi! Welcome to Luxury in Moderation, where we appreciate the finer things in life without going overboard. Today I'm going to do a 6-month review of my BIRKIN 30 and go over a lot of the things I wish I did know about the BIRKIN before I purchased it. If you're new here, welcome. My name's Joanne and every week I upload videos about luxury handbags and other luxury lifestyle products. So if you like this kind of content, please make sure to like this video and subscribe below. Now let's get into the BIRKIN basics. So even though I spent a lot of time looking at BIRKINs, watching videos on BIRKINs before I went to Paris and tried to score my own, I was still very surprised after I actually purchased it and used it. So just to set the stage, this is a 30 size in the Cellier style in Epsom leather with gold hardware. And this is the taupe color. The very first thing I discovered when I brought the BIRKIN back to my hotel room in Paris was that these vertical hardware bars are not sealed at the top. So it's kind of hard to see. But that's why I didn't know it even though I did so much research. And I think these things are called pontettes. But basically, because I thought that they were solid across the top, I thought that the sangles had to be slid through the opening. However, because it is open on top, you can actually place the sangles up and down through the top section. Now the bottom section is solid so that the sangles can rest through the pontette, but because I was trying to slide the sangles through, I actually ruined the protective covering that was over the sangle hardware, and it actually pushed the sticker off. So that's why this sangle does not have the protective covering and this one does. But let me get into that protective covering in a second. What I also wanted to point out was that because it is hardware on hardware, when the sangle hardware does come in contact with the pontette hardware, it can of course scratch each other. So this sangle has a lot of scratches on it already, which I'm okay with because of course I knew that was gonna happen. And I also took the protective covering off of this middle large hardware, and that is because when I went to the Barcelona boutique, the SA there, who was very nice and sweet, saw my BIRKIN and saw that the protective covering was still over the middle piece and was like, oh my gosh, you need to take that off. Now, I think that the Hermes SAs are trained to say and to tell their customers to take the protective covering off of the hardware as soon as possible, because it is true the stickiness of that covering can oxidize or mess up the hardware. So you really do have to keep an eye on that. I don't know how much longer I'm going to keep the protective covering off of this sangle. But I also think another reason why they look for that is because it kind of shows you're not a reseller, because you're the owner of the bag, you're the one who's using it, and you're not trying to keep it pristine for selling later down the line. So after the encounter with that SA, I did take the protective covering off of this middle piece, and that's because I feel like this piece isn't going to get as scratched up because it does have this poking out and kind of protecting the surface of this. So this middle piece should not be as scratched up as my sangle piece. Moving on to the second thing I noticed about the BIRKIN is that the back is actually taller than the front. So even though I believe the leather is all one piece, they cut it so that the back actually is about maybe half an inch to 3/4 of an inch taller than the front of the BIRKIN. Now, this doesn't really impact functionality or anything like that. It does kind of decrease the handle drop of the back versus the front. And then you can also see a little bit of the back flap when you're looking at it straight on. But for me, that's just something I didn't realize before. So when I saw it for myself, I was like, is that right? I didn't realize that was the proper way a Birkin is shaped. And along with that, this front flap is a separate piece of leather that is, I think, sewn and then glued to the back piece of the Birkin. And the place where these two leather pieces connect is very, very thick. So for me, you can see that the glazing of, where they basically glued these two pieces together, and this little nub in the under that flap there is very thick. And that was also very surprising to me because, you don't really see that until you get up close and personal with a Birkin. So the Kelly doesn't have this issue because I think the Kelly is all one piece. It's not like two different pieces for the flap. So I just thought that it looked kind of funny. I don't know exactly why this piece is like the way it is. Is it like a separate piece that both flaps are sewn to? Or maybe they have an extra piece of leather or whatever this is so that there is actually depth. So when you pull the flap over the front of the Birkin, it's not like too tight. Maybe that's the reason. I honestly don't know. And they don't really explain, even though they have videos where they show someone working on a Birkin. So that's my best guess. I have never seen anyone else bring it up, so obviously it is not a big deal. But it was, again, just something that I didn't know before, and it surprised me that this is how the flap of the Birkin is constructed. So there you can see, I kind of have it closed. For Epsom leather, it's very stiff, so it's kind of hard for me to get it like open and closed all the time, which is why I just leave it open. But you can see that there is some depth there. Now, after having this bag for about 6 months and having used it quite a few times, I've definitely noticed some things about how it functions as a bag in real life when it's not just sitting and looking pretty on a shelf. So the very first thing is that even though I have one of the lightest leathers that Hermes uses, I still find this 30 size heavy. So for example, I was out shopping in a mall. I only had a few items in the Birkin, just my wallet, some hand sanitizer, and a very light sweater. So it was barely half full. I had carried it around for about an hour or two, and it was already weighing down on my forearms. So I had been carrying it like this in the crook of my arm, and my forearm was already getting red. And my arm was actually kind of cramping up because of like the way it was clutched. Now I did switch it up. I switched it to my other hand. I switched it to holding my top handle. But no matter which way you carry the Birkin, it's really not a fuss-free bag. So for me, the easiest style to carry would be a crossbody bag or a shoulder bag where you can have your hands free. So for me, I honestly don't even know how I would get along with a Birkin 25 because I could really only top handle it or hold it maybe in my wrist. And that is just going to be a little bit cumbersome no matter what. I'm already finding the Birkin 30 to be not the easiest bag to handle. And then on top of that, it is a pretty bulky bag. So it does have quite a bit of depth here. So when it was up against my body and I was holding it in the crook of my arm, I had a lot of extra width to think about spatially. I couldn't like maneuver myself between thin spaces. I just had this extra width that I had to clear space for. So after carrying the Birkin for a lot of days, I found myself really craving a thinner bag. It was just a little bit cumbersome carrying such a wide bag, and especially in the Cellier construction in an Epsom leather where it is very structured, there's not much give to it. It might be a different story if you have another leather in the retourné style, something like a Togo or a Clemence that's going to really be really soft and kind of even collapse against your body over a long period of time when the leather gets softer. But at least for now, I find myself really being aware of how bulky this bag is and how I'm trying to not bump into things as I move about. So talking about leathers getting softer, I have noticed already that the inside of my bag, I can already see a little bit of the leather loosening. So I don't know if you can see that now, but for example, this piece of leather here for the slip pocket, I do tend to put my hand sanitizers in there, so it has stretched out that slip pocket a little bit. Then on the inside, the leather is a little bit softer than the Epsom leather on the outside, so you might even be able to see some of the wrinkles that have come out. Just the leather, you know, naturally stretching a little bit, becoming a little looser. So I completely agree that that is a natural thing and I want to use my bag, but it definitely does not look as pristine as the day that I got the bag. So when you think how people say that, oh, it looks as perfect as the day that I got it, or it hasn't aged one bit in 10 years, that's probably false unless they've just put it in their closet, because the leather does stretch as it should because it is leather and it's not plastic. Talking about the leather that I personally have, which is Epsom, I do agree that the Epsom leather is slightly more plasticky feeling than a buttery soft Togo leather. I am a person who really appreciates a soft leather such as the Bottega Veneta leathers. I think that it is a sign of a good luxury leather. However, because I wanted the lightness of an Epsom, I was willing to make that trade-off. So I don't think the Epsom leather is as special. It's very similar to a Prada Saffiano leather, and also the way that the grain is pressed into the leather. So the grains that you see, it's actually not natural. It is man-made and hand-pressed to make all those little bumps. And I feel like it's a little bit similar to the way LV has their epi leather. So maybe there's a connection there of why both kinds of leathers start with EP. I don't know French, but you know, if you're French and you know, maybe it's how they name this kind of leather that is, you know, hand pressed. But I will say that Hermes leather is thicker, and that is another sign of a good quality leather. Now, getting into my last point of Hermes Quality, it's funny because my husband laughs and says, you know, the tagline of Hermes lovers is that, oh, the quality is so great, the craftsmanship is so great. And yet, when I first got this Birkin back home, I noticed some cracking in the glazing that really freaked me out, that made me think, oh my gosh, is my bag defected? And I was immediately questioning this quality that Hermes is supposed to have. After getting up close and personal with my Birkin for a while, I definitely have kind of stopped putting it on a pedestal and thinking that it's this like glorious, perfect item and it's the end-all be-all perfect bag, because there are imperfections, because it is handmade. First of all, being handmade is a luxury quality, and with that, there's going to be some signs of that hand craftsmanship versus a machine craftsmanship. So of course Hermes is taking a very close and detailed look at the quality, and that's why the stitching is going to be as uniform as possible. However, it is not going to be as uniform as if a machine made this bag. That's just not possible because humans aren't machines. So when I notice some things that show me that the bag is not perfect, such as there is wrinkling here, there's little micro cracks here, there's little threads that are coming out of the stitching, I kind of have to remind myself that it's natural, that luxury is meant to be used, and that normal wear and tear is going to happen. Okay, so even though this product is a luxury product, is handmade, and there's quality control, and there is very tight and high standards for a luxury Birkin bag, it's still living in the real world and it's still going to wear down. Lastly, I did want to update you guys that I did get VAT back. So when I purchased the Birkin in Paris, I then had some time in Italy and I mailed back the VAT form. So the processing is a little bit slower these days. I think prior to COVID, they would get the VAT back within a month. I got VAT back for this bag after about 1.5 months. I mailed the form back at the airport at the beginning of September, and I got the credit card refund into my account in the middle of October, and I got about 9% back. So those are all the things that I learned after carrying my Birkin for about 6 months. Please let me know if you have any additional questions, and I hope this video was helpful. Thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, and I'll see you